My talk is called "It's Dangerous to Go Alone." Take this on finding your way in code that's new to you. So it's not particularly about starting something new or going to a new place. It could be just old code that you've never seen before. So the reason I wrote this talk is I like to talk about tooling. I want to empower others, and I wish someone had told me before. And mostly to make up for the terrible legacy I've left and continue to. This is a quick overview of some issues and solutions for finding my way around. So there's some things that are Alanisms, because I have a particular workflow. I'm not saying this is the best workflow. So what do we need to find our way? We need to start. We need to find somewhere to start. We need to get around, and we need to retell the story at the end of the day. Where can we start our journey? So I've found when I approach something brand new, so for example, this could be open source, just wanting to contribute to open source is actually kind of hard. We want to have a problem we want to solve, because this puts us on a quest, and we can't spend time reading all the lore and the dialogue then. It's more important for us to actually get deep and figure out our foothold. So this route finding has been much more successful for me than trying to eat the elephant. Reading code and just like, oh, I'm gonna just read this and oh, it does that. Kind of just always leads me to being demotivated. So the three ways I've been trying is there a way I can find a test? Is there a way we can activate it through a UI? Is there a pretty specific string we could start looking for in the code? And these are in like order of high fidelity to low fidelity. So as a starting point and to kind of like ground the examples I'm going to give, this is just something I pulled off the Rails issue. And we will use this example not for any of the things that are in here. It's actually just for, we need to find where not, and that's it. There's none of the other stuff is relevant. So getting around in Ruby. How does Ruby get in the way? Ruby is designed in a way that makes it static analysis a little bit harder and static analysis tools harder to use. Things like defining methods at runtime, using method missing to redirect, and auto-loading, which is specific to Rails, not like all Ruby projects, makes it hard. Like you don't even know where the code comes from. It's like, oh, there you go. So we can still jump with static tools. So we can use C tags and language service. So I'm just going to give you an example of doing that. So we could use C tags, and I will explain what C tags are. It's a program that generates an index of methods and symbols. So it can be like, oh yeah, my editor wants to find this symbol, go to the next one. So I can jump to build where clause. So you can see that this is sending a method, which is always fun, rather than calling it specifically. So I can use my shortcut to jump to a C tag, which is control and close angle bracket. And look, we found it, which is actually blew my mind. I don't use C tags normally. But if you use like a language server, it's requires more semantic analysis, so you can't just jump to a random symbol. You will need a method called like where clause. Just to explain the language server is a server that implements the language server protocol, which Microsoft developed for VS Code, but it's an open thing, and many languages implement the language server, so that you can implement it with whatever editor you use. It could be VS Code, Atom, Kakune. I use NeoVim, and that's what I use the language server in. So, sorry, I'm going to switch back to my slides. So that static analysis probably only gets me half the time. I'm like, okay, That's, and she goes, no definition found. Sorry. So half the time I have to do the searching and guessing thing, which is like a project-wide string search. So we just like, where's the definition? Where is this thing? And to give you an example of that, I mean, it's not going to be particularly exciting, but like we can go, build where clause. We're going to, so if you can see my mouse, you probably can't, but I'm typing build where clause in this thing, where clause. And okay, we can find all the usages of build where clause. And maybe we want to actually find def build where clause. That's actually closer to what we're doing. So look at that, we found it. It's somewhere here, build where clause. So it's probably that. So go back to my slide, sorry. So next slide. We can automate that a little bit using something called Anyjump in Vim. So there's a VS Code alternative called Dumjump. I don't use VS Code on the regular, so I can't vouch for all the VS Code ones, but the Vim ones I can. We can use Anyjump, which is just automates that by automatically looking up a bunch of regexes. So for example, it knows like, okay, you probably want to look for a defined method. So we can just use my shortcut of leader J, and then it goes, okay, here we go. This is a definition. These are some usages of it. Which one do you want to go to? And you can expand it out and go, okay, I want to go there. I think those kinds of things make it like that lowering that barrier of like, I got to think of this thing, so I got to find this thing just a little bit lower. And so it lets us move faster. The other thing that we can use is landmarks. So Rails has a lot of conventions, and projects generally have conventions, and you might encode them actually. And then you can use alternate file finders in your editor. For example, Rails Vim projectionist, which is just a general anything, and VS Code alternate file, which can use projections JSON. So I'll give you an example of that. So what does that look like? So this is just an example Rails app I've brought up. So for example, we've got this def new, and you're like, how do I get to the view? So you could use like the file explorer or something like that, or fuzzy find to it. But I can type :r over new, and it'll take me to the new template. And I'm in the new template, and I want to go back to the controller. I can go :r, and I'm back here. So this also works for models and tests. So :r between a model and its test, and that's very handy in terms of lowering that navigational issue of like you get around and find stuff. Back to the slides. So I was also talking about like how static analysis can't work for some cases, and navigating is also, you'd have to do it in your head. So one of the things you can do is do debugger-driven development. So actually running the code, and we drop a binding in and we go see where it takes us. So Pry has a really nice visualization of the, I don't know what to call it visualization. It is just a handy method called show source that lets you trace through method missings and runtime defined methods. So I will give you an example of that. So we're doing that example again, and we found this test where it's like, okay, author post where not. So if we have the, we save the condition as author.post.where, okay, and then we can do something like show source condition.not. And it's like, okay, it's here, active record relation query methods RB20. We have this definition of the where clause, which is exactly where we found it before. But you can imagine doing that through more difficult metaprogramming things. And especially metaprogramming is really heavy in Rails. You probably need to open the active record gem and drop in a binding once you find like, it's in this library. And you can easily do that with bundle open and find the exact place that you need to put it and drop it in. So to actually fix these issues, it's actually like, we need like structural change. It's actually, we need type Ruby. And this is a massive investment, but with the success of TypeScript, this is like one of the most high impact ways we can globally improve the mechanics of getting around in Ruby. And it solves like whole other classes of problem, but I've never used it. I'm not sure what our horizon looks like to actually using it, but I'm very interested. So the last part of going on our code adventure is retelling our story. And this is like the most important part, right? We need to make sure our story is right. So we need to use the right vocabulary, and we need to ask someone, probably someone who knows, or actually if there's another reference, and we need to build a map. So the vocabulary is very difficult to make sure that everyone has the same understanding of words, right? Everyone has different backgrounds and everyone comes from a different angle. So if we're using a word that can be misconstrued or has a very special meaning in our code base in particular, we need to make sure that we are really explaining that. So the other part of this is asking someone, which sounds like an easy thing to do, but I've really struggled with this personally. So I need to make sure I understand why I'm asking. Giving upfront whether I need a shortcut, like I need to get this done today, yesterday, 2 of them, versus put me on the path, like, I'm just, I need a pointer and I want to figure it out myself. And avoiding XY problems where you're asking someone to fix your solution where you don't actually tell them what's the root problem, and then it kind of leads you to asking weird questions. So the counter to that is like, why am I not asking? So I think I class these 2 things that I've done right and wrong. I think an unproductive thing would be, I don't want to appear like I don't get it, because that's going to slow you down of getting it. And the other one is, and really, really important now that we're mostly remote, is they must be busy. It's really easy to assume someone's busy. So the productive type of stuff is actually, the productive reasons not to ask is I want to understand it on my own terms and just clarify my assumptions and figure out exactly what's the fastest way I can prove my own moral wrong. So building maps, I've written this and it's a bit of a clickbait header because it's not a map. When you have code that's hard to understand, it's not like geography. There wasn't like a design. It was like, maybe it was a design, but it's changed so much now that it's more like archaeology. And when you have a complete understanding, it's more like a story than drawing a map. You'll be like, these reasons this is because of these things, and this is why it's got this weird edge. So we need to understand our assumptions. There's like evolutionary pressure on our code to become one thing when it's another. And you have to dig through the Git commit history to actually figure out like, why is this like this, or whatever documentation you can find. So this picture is a fish and my head, if you can't tell. So I've recently been playing a lot of Pokemon with my son, and it's my most knowledge about most recent knowledge about evolution. But I was watching some YouTube video, as you do, and what it told me was the same bones that become gills in our fishy ancestors become tiny bones in our ears. And it's like just blew my mind, because I'm like, how come gills don't become lungs? I don't breathe with my ears. That makes no sense. And the reason is it's because the gills material disappeared when it wasn't useful anymore. But the bones, where they're located, it's all around your sensory business, right? So your eyes, your nose, your brain. So they became the ears because they were like the location was good, and the lungs came, and lungs and the gut share ancestry. So when our mental models like this collide with reality, we really need to take a step back and understand the story of why our code is labeled gills when it's ears, or why it's the other way around, ears when it's gills. Why are we breathing through our ears? So how can we empower those that come after us by changing the environment? Hopefully through this talk, we empower others to go on code adventures themselves. So that means like suggesting tools, inside and outside code, writing guides, sharing our workflows, and doing code reading exercises. So another thing we could do is like, in the hygiene sense, is leave better road signs for our future selves. I'm saying future selves as in, I'm a developer, and the next person is a developer, even if that isn't me. So hopefully we can name things intentionally and leave time to clean up after ourselves. And I think if we are kind and understand the pressures we and our past selves have been under, we can make it more acceptable to ask, I need help with this. I do not understand how this got like this. Maybe don't ask like that. How did this get like this? Probably like a not the most kind way to say it. So thank you. I'm Alan. I'm the head of engineering at the Lookout Way. We build care management platform that empowers our users to focus on what they do best. That sounds really similar to what Kevin said, I think. And our values are calm, pragmatic, empowering, and human, and we're hiring. So thank you for listening to my talk.
Thanks, Alan.